What would you do if you were born with a target on your back? Not a metaphorical one, a literal beacon that screams your location to every predator within sight. Imagine being so visible that hiding becomes impossible, so different that even your own family turns against you. This is the reality for albino animals born into the wild, and the odds they face are almost impossibly stacked against them. In 2019, wildlife photographers in Tanzania captured something extraordinary. A pure white giraffe calf walking alongside its normally colored mother across the savannah. The images went viral. People around the world marveled at its ghostly beauty, this ethereal presence against the golden grass. But experienced wildlife biologists who saw those same photos felt something completely different. They felt dread, because they knew what almost always comes next for creatures like this one. And sure enough, within months, that white giraffe and its mother were found dead, killed by poachers who'd had no trouble tracking them across the landscape. Their white coloring had made them impossible to miss. That's the cruel paradox of albinism in nature. The very thing that makes these animals so breathtaking to human eyes is precisely what makes their survival nearly impossible. But why? What is it about being white that turns the natural world into such a hostile place? To understand that, we need to start with what albinism actually is. And here's the thing. It's not simply about being white. Albinism is a genetic condition that happens when an animal inherits mutated genes from both parents, genes that affect the production of melanin. Now, melanin is the pigment responsible for coloring skin, fur, feathers, scales, and eyes in virtually all animals. When the genetic instructions for producing it get disrupted, the result is a creature born completely unable to create this essential pigment at all. The mutation can happen in any species: birds, mammals, reptiles, fish, even insects. No branch of the animal kingdom is immune. And the telltale signs are pretty distinctive: pure white or very pale coloring across the entire body, and perhaps most notably, pink or red eyes. That reddish eye color, by the way, comes from blood vessels showing through the unpigmented iris. There's simply no melanin there to mask them. Now, you might have seen white animals that don't have pink eyes. These are usually not true albinos. They're animals with a related but different condition called leucism, and the distinction actually matters. Leucism affects only the pigment cells in the skin and fur, while true albinism disrupts melanin production throughout the entire body, including the eyes. So a leucistic animal might have pale or patchy coloring but still retain normal eye color and relatively normal vision. A true albino, though, the challenges go far deeper than appearance. The lack of melanin in an albino animal's eyes creates some really serious vision problems, and I mean serious. Melanin plays a crucial role in eye development. It helps form the proper structure of the retina and the pathways connecting the eyes to the brain. Without it, those structures often just don't develop the way they should. Many albino animals experience nystagmus. That's an involuntary rapid movement of the eyes that makes it almost impossible to focus properly. Others deal with extreme sensitivity to light because there's simply no pigment there to filter the intensity. And some have such poor depth perception that judging distances becomes nearly impossible, which, when you think about it, is already devastating on its own. But here's the thing. The problems actually start before we even get to vision. The most immediate, most deadly consequence of albinism is something simpler than that. It's the complete destruction of camouflage. Picture a rabbit in a meadow. Its brown fur blends with the earth and dried grass. A hawk circling overhead scans the ground below, but the rabbit's coloring helps it just disappear into the landscape. Now picture that same rabbit born pure white. It's sitting in that same meadow, and it's like a spotlight has been turned on it. There's no blending, no hiding, no disappearing. Every predator for hundreds of meters can see exactly where it is. And this is not a minor disadvantage, not even close. For prey animals, camouflage is often the single most important survival tool they have. Studies on wild mice have shown that albino individuals are taken by predators at rates dramatically higher than their normally colored siblings. In some environments, the predation rate for albino prey animals approaches 100% before they even reach adulthood. 100%. Think about that for a second. Now, you might think, okay, but what about the ocean? Surely color matters less out there. It doesn't. Albino fish and marine mammals are strikingly visible against the blue depths. A white seal pup on dark rocks or in dark water becomes an easy meal for sharks and orcas. An albino fish in a coral reef might as well be wearing a sign that says, "Eat me." The forest presents the same problem, just in different colors. An albino deer fawn, which would normally be speckled with spots that mimic dappled sunlight on the forest floor, instead appears as a solid white shape moving through the undergrowth. Wolves, cougars, bears, they can track it effortlessly. The fawn's mother can try to protect it, but she cannot hide what simply cannot be hidden. So, what about predators themselves? Surely being white wouldn't matter if you're the one doing the hunting, right? Unfortunately, it matters just as much. Predators rely on camouflage to ambush their prey. A tiger's stripes break up its outline in tall grass. A snow leopard's pale spotted fur lets it vanish against mountain rocks. An albino predator loses all of that, every single bit of it. There are documented cases of albino alligators in the wild, though they rarely survive long. Their white bodies are instantly visible to the fish, birds, and mammals they hunt. Prey animals see them coming from far away and simply leave. And so the albino predator slowly starves, not because it lacks the instinct or the ability to hunt, but because it can never get close enough to actually catch anything. It's a brutal kind of trap, honestly. All the drive, none of the tools. Remember those eye problems we talked about earlier? Well, here's where things get really brutal for albino animals, because on top of everything else, their vision is genuinely terrible. And for a predator, that's not just an inconvenience, that's catastrophic. Take hawks and owls. These birds are built around their eyesight. Everything they do, every hunt, every strike, every calculated dive toward a mouse in a field, depends on exceptional vision. An albino hawk dealing with nystagmus and light sensitivity can't do any of that effectively. It can't judge the distance for a strike. It can't spot a mouse moving through grass from 20 meters up in the air. The whole predatory toolkit just falls apart. But here's the thing. Prey animals don't get off easy either. Their vision problems just create a different kind of death sentence. Instead of being unable to catch food, they're unable to see what's trying to catch them. Albino rabbits, deer, the whole crowd, they often seem almost weirdly unaware of danger. And that's because, quite literally, they cannot see it coming. Their normal-sighted herd mates are already bolting, already gone, and the albino individual is just standing there squinting at some blurry shapes in the distance, trying to make sense of what it's seeing. And then there's navigation, which sounds almost mundane compared to can't-see predators, but it genuinely matters. Animals rely on visual landmarks constantly to find food, water, shelter, to know where they are and where they're going. An albino animal with poor eyesight may struggle to remember and locate the resources it needs to survive. It might wander into dangerous territory simply because it can't see well enough to know where it's heading. So, even if an albino animal somehow threads all of that, avoids predators, figures out how to eat, doesn't get lost, it still faces another devastating challenge. Rejection from its own species. This one hits differently, honestly. Social animals, and that's a huge portion of the animal kingdom, depend on group membership just to function. Herds, flocks, packs, pods. That structure provides protection, helps with finding food, makes reproduction possible. Being cast out of a social group is often a death sentence even for a perfectly normal, healthy animal. For an albino, social rejection happens with disturbing frequency. Animals recognize each other partly through appearance, and when one individual looks radically different, and an albino absolutely does, other members of the species may simply not recognize it as one of their own. Albino animals have been observed being attacked, chased away, deliberately excluded from groups that would otherwise accept them without a second thought, and it gets worse. In some species, mothers have been known to reject or even kill their albino offspring. I know that sounds horrifying, but from an evolutionary perspective, there's a cold, uncomfortable logic to it. The mother may instinctively recognize that this white, highly visible baby is going to attract predators to the entire group. By abandoning or eliminating the albino offspring, she protects her other young and herself. Nature isn't sentimental about this kind of calculation. For the albino animals that do survive to adulthood, there's still one more wall to climb, finding a mate. Many species choose mates based partly on appearance, bright colors, strong patterns, healthy pigmentation. All of those things signal genetic fitness, and albino signals the opposite. Potential mates often show no interest or actively avoid albino individuals altogether, which means even if an albino animal clears every other obstacle, it may never reproduce. The genetic line ends anyway, and the social isolation, it compounds everything. A rejected albino has to find food alone, watch for predators alone, navigate the entire world alone. Without the support network that social animals are fundamentally built to depend on, survival doesn't just get harder, it gets exponentially harder. And yet, against all of that, the visibility, the vision, the rejection, the loneliness, some albino animals do survive. These rare survivors teach us something genuinely important about just how complex and unpredictable nature really is. Now, here's something interesting. Being white isn't always a death sentence. In the right environment, it's actually an advantage. The Arctic is the obvious example. Polar bears, Arctic foxes, snowy owls, all white, all for good reason. Their coloring comes from different genetic mechanisms than true albinism, but still, and even genuinely albino animals have been found making it in snow-covered regions where that total lack of pigment stops being a liability and starts being, well, really effective camouflage. Then there's human intervention. Some albino animals survive simply because we step in. Wildlife sanctuaries, conservation programs, they've sheltered famous albino individuals, provided food, kept predators away. These animals can live long, full lives, though, and this is worth acknowledging, they're living under artificial conditions, conditions that nature alone wouldn't provide. Sometimes it really does just come down to luck. An albino animal might happen to be born somewhere with almost no predators. It might have an unusually protective mother. It might stumble onto a food source that doesn't require hunting or covering huge distances. And these fortunate individuals remind us of something important. Survival isn't purely deterministic. Chance plays a role, a real one. But here's the part I find most remarkable. Some albino animals actually seem to compensate. Researchers have documented individuals that are noticeably more cautious, more selective about when and where they move, more tuned in to sounds and smells, leaning on those senses since they can't fully rely on vision. Whether these behavioral shifts are learned or instinctive, nobody quite knows yet. But they show something genuinely striking about how adaptable life can be, even under extreme constraints. The albino moose of Scandinavia are a great example of this. White moose show up regularly enough in Swedish and Norwegian forests that they've developed an almost mythical status locally. And some of these animals have survived for years, possibly because they live in protected areas, possibly because adult moose simply don't have many natural predators in those regions, and possibly because the snowy winters give them that periodic cover. But, and this matters, we shouldn't romanticize these exceptions. For every albino animal that makes it, dozens don't, hundreds maybe. The statistics are brutal. Most albino animals born in the wild die young, taken by predators, starved because hunting is so much harder, weakened by sun damage to skin that has zero pigment protection. The survivors aren't proof that the dangers aren't real. They're a testament to just how extraordinary it is when any creature manages to overcome disadvantages this profound. So, what does all of this actually tell us? Maybe that beauty in nature isn't always beneficial, that standing out can be deadly, and that the traits we find most striking, the ones that stop us in our tracks, are sometimes the exact ones that nature selects against. Albino animals captivate us precisely because they're rare. And they're rare precisely because they so rarely survive. So the next time you see a photo of a white whale, a pale deer, a ghostly bird, you're not just looking at something beautiful, you're looking at something that probably shouldn't exist at all, statistically speaking, because what it took for that creature to still be alive, that's the real story. Every albino animal in the wild is walking a razor's edge between survival and extinction. If you enjoyed this one, and honestly I hope you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really does help more than you might think. And if something in here actually surprised you, give it a like. That's always good to know. Oh, and the comments. Seriously, I read those. Have you ever seen an albino animal? In the wild, in a zoo, anywhere? I genuinely love to hear about it. Drop it down below. All right. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.